So welcome, everybody,
to our Monday podcast.
Brought to you by the listeners of, not the listeners, the subscribers.
Subscribers of the New European.
Subscribers of the New European.
And listened to by the listeners of the Two Mats.
Hand over their cold, hard cash.
Bless them.
To support good journalism.
We love them.
And you should do that too if you don't. But anyway, let's crack on with the
Crack
podcast.
on. So it's going to be a Keir Starmer week. We're going to have quite a few of them, I suspect. And maybe we should get into the spirit by having a quick blast of his interview on Sunday's Laura Kuenssberg show.
Good idea.
When we talk about tough decisions, I'm talking about tough decisions. The things the last government ran away from, that governments traditionally run away from, I'm convinced that because they've run away from difficult decisions, we haven't got the change we need for the country. And because I'm so determined to bring about that change, I'll do the tough things and I'll do them early to make sure that we can bring about the change that we need.
So one of the tough things he's decided to do is to take 200 or 300 quid off every pensioner in the country, apart from the poorest of the poor.
It is his civil servants in Whitehall say a suboptimal move.
I mean, they are fucking this up, aren't they? Yes. I mean, in terms of presentation.
Yes. I mean, one of the things that I slightly despair of is that just reading the newsletters and the papers and listening to the radio and so on, everyone is treating this in political terms, and that's right, because it is a major political goof. The means testing of the winter fuel allowance to save £1.4 billion, which is already announced by Rachel Reeves. But actually what really matters at the moment is the social consequences, because it's really heavily means testing this. I mean, this is not sort of gradations. This is saying that no one who doesn't get pension credit, which I think means basically it's complicated pension credit, but broadly speaking, it means you only earn 11,000 a year or 17,000 if you're a couple.
That's
which
right.
Is very little.
Yeah.
You can
and by the way, we should say, and we'll come on to talk about this, there are lots of people who can get pension credit but who don't. So there are lots of people who are getting just £8,000 a year.
Right. And not to get ahead of ourselves, but this has led to a huge surge of applications for people for pension credit, which could conceivably lead to the saving
to nullify the
being
whole
completely
thing.
Eradicated. So what's going on? I mean, it's familiar themes really to anyone who's listened to the podcast before, but I think that this government hasn't yet really got its head around the fact that it's won the election with a working majority of 167, and it's using sort of what are now quite old-fashioned Labour virility tests to show how tough it is, and fiscal prudence is top of that list, as is pretending that the asylum and immigration issue can be resolved by really tough law enforcement. It's all macho. And the odd thing about this one in particular is that it's a very odd one to light upon. I mean, Theresa May thought about it in 2017. That didn't happen. But actually, taking the winter fuel allowance away from pensioners will lead to there will be people who don't get pension credit or already have it but need or don't quite qualify for it and do suffer as a consequence of this.
And this is going to go on. This is going to be like an albatross around their neck for the whole winter.
It's a very, very eccentric thing to have chosen as a hill to die on.
So there are two things that we should explore. One is, what should they have done? And the second thing is, what should they have said? Because I think there's a way they could have communicated what they have done.
Yes.
And, to use the old Alistair Campbell accusation of spinning what they've done in a way that would have made sense to a lot of people.
Well,
instead of making it look like we've got a £22 billion hole and the people we're going to pick on are pensioners, which is just crazy.
I mean, I first of all, the first thing I wouldn't have done is picked on pensioners at all in my first outing as the new Chancellor and the new Prime Minister. The truth is that the sum that they think they'll save, 1.4 billion, and as we said, it probably won't save in fact if the measure does go ahead, it does not justify the the pain that they're going to go through, and justifiably so, I'm afraid.
And, mate, you don't. I mean, we could rename this podcast 2020 hindsight, couldn't we? But
yes.
You don't need 2020 hindsight to have seen this shit show escalate, given everyone's agenda, and given the fact that the pension credit is now being. The pension credit hotline is now being bombarded.
80% rise or something.
Yeah,
surge
100%.
in interest.
Last
What,
another 38,000 people or something like this. Suddenly,
can you blame them? Yeah.
So fantastic. Now, any fool could have seen that would happen if that was what this abandonment of the fuel allowance was
on
going
the
to
flow chart in the
We're
Treasury
going to take
seminar.
the fuel allowance away unless you claim pension credit. By the way,
what are possible things that might happen as a consequence?
And there's 850,000 of you who aren't claiming it. So come on,
Yes.
So instead of saying we're going to scrap the winter fuel allowance, they say we're going to make sure that the people who really need more money are going to get it. We're going to divert the money from higher rate taxpayer pensioners or people who choose not to have it, or we'll tax, as Ros Altman was saying on Radio 4, we'll tax higher rate people on their winter fuel allowance.
Yes.
And we're going to make sure that those 850,000 people who haven't got it, and that's 30% of the population of pensioners who could get pension credit, don't take it at the moment.
No, right.
So we're going to make sure they do get it. So so you've got a good Labour story there. We're supporting the poorest instead of the narrative, which has run ahead of them now.
But they've obviously decided that this is a virility test. So there's ridiculous. So they've sent out Dame Diana Johnson, the policing minister, out on the broadcasting round this morning, Monday, and she very sort of generally suggested that there might be ways of modifying this or making it more progressive, relating it to council back tax bans and so on. And it immediately, Downing Street slapped it down and said she misspoke, which means nothing. I mean, she didn't misspeak. She didn't mispronunciate her words. I mean, she just said something and they said, no, that's not true, which is not a good look.
No.
To have a minister out representing the government then being slapped down by Downing Street for saying actually something quite reasonable.
It reminds me of something we said in another podcast about the fact that they still seem to be kind of stuck in this limbo where, yes, they've won this enormous landslide, but they don't quite know what to do with it. And
I think they're frightened of their own shadow.
Yeah.
I think they're frightened of the markets, whatever that means.
Yeah.
I mean, it can be a very general phrase, that whole market.
They're definitely frightened of the Daily Bloody Mail.
They're frightened of the Daily Mail, and they're frightened of. I think that I do think there's a general feeling that the election result, which is true, the election result was based on a very relative, historically low vote share. But the fact is that the system is the system, and they have a huge majority, and as they have an obligation to the Labour Party, to the country, to use that majority to get things done and fast. And here is where I get really puzzled, which is Starmer, slightly weirdly, is obsessed by missions. So he made the King and the King's speech say, "My mission-led government."
That's right, yeah.
The mission-led everything, right? Well, the definition of a mission is that at the start of the mission, before you undertake all the hard graft of the mission, you explain in detail what the point of the mission is.
Where are you going?
Yeah. Right? And what I thought was extraordinary about the Laura Kuenssberg interview was that, okay, he says this, we don't agree with it, but I was hoping that in the course of the interview he would say, right, I totally understand, and we're going to be unpopular, but
for a reason. Well, what's the reason?
The reason is because he kept saying we're going to fix the foundations of the house. I said, okay, and then what are you going to do to the house? And he didn't say anything.
So the problem is he's using analogies to explain the mission, but the specifics he's acting on are really hurting people, not in an abstract way, but they're hurting real people who are now resentful about the fact that they've given Labour their vote. There was a guy on the radio who said, I had a feeling that I might regret my Labour vote in the first year, but I didn't think I'd regret it in the first couple
2
of
months.
weeks.
I know, it's ridiculous. But it's a bit like Kennedy announcing, in the famous speech that instead of announcing that they'd put a man on the moon and bring him back by the end of the decade, saying what we're going to do is we're going to spend a lot of American taxpayers' money on a mission that might not fail. I can't really talk about what it is.
Yeah, we're going to develop a space rocket.
We're going to develop,
but we're not going to tell you why.
But what we're going to do is just do a huge amount of construction down at Cape Canaveral, and I can't really tell you why, but the main thing to bear in mind is it's going to cost you, the American taxpayer, a huge amount of money, right? And your social security is going to be worth less.
That's right.
And I don't ask me to apologise because that's my job. I'm the president,
and I'm prepared to be unpopular.
And it's all Eisenhower's fault, right? Now, this is not is not a new frontier, is it?
I don't get it. I don't know whether it's bad advice or whether they are, like I said earlier, they're caught in this kind of, we're not quite sure what gear we should be in right now. Or whether, and this is more worryingly, whether it is beyond Keir to do this.
This is the problem, is that I think that he is the difference between government and running a service like the Crown Prosecution, which he did well, is huge. Governing a country is all about many things, lots of which are technical and policy-based and involve sacrifice and trade-offs and all the rest of it. But it also involves a lot more. Horrible word. It does involve always a narrative. And if the narrative isn't there, as we've said before, someone else will fill the narrative
and
for you.
And the narrative is not there.
There is I really am perplexed because there is zero narrative. I thought that by, where are we now? We're in the beginnings of September. I thought, okay, give them the summer. But by now, there would be a kind of, I know this is hurting, but this is where we're heading, right? Tory's terrible. Tory's left with a terrible legacy. It's going to be painful. I get that. I understand. I'm sorry. But, you just wait and see what we've got in store.
Yeah.
Now, you don't have to necessarily spell everything out, but you do have to give more than there's a kind of, it's an odd word to use, but his technocracy is almost priggish.
Yes.
It's like, don't ask me what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing.
Yes.
I'm piloting this plane.
That's right.
You don't come into the cockpit and ask me, what I'm doing. Yeah. And I'm afraid that's not how accountable politics works.
It's not, everyone says, oh, well, they've got 5 years, well, they haven't really, because they've got a couple of years, and then there's going to be local elections, and there's going to be a crunch moment within a couple of years.
Yes.
Where they could end up bunkered down in defensive posture for the rest of their term.
The strategic worries are greater than the tactical worries. The polls show that he's way ahead of any of the leadership hopefuls on the Tory side. Reform is a real worry, as we've often said, but it still has only 5 MPs. So I'm not worried about 2 years from now, 3 years from now. But after that, there is a real clear and present danger that this progressive experiment turns out to be a big dud.
Yeah. Well, they've got, look, it is incredibly frustrating. And and the reason it's frustrating is that, I'm Team Keir, really.
No, of course.
I want it to work. I want him to do well.
I want this to work out.
But I'm banging my head against the wall, wondering, what is the promise now? What is the mission? Where's the positivity?
It's funny because he gets bits of it in pieces. So Laura Kuenssberg asked him quite properly about whether he was worried about the far right generally, not just the riots in August, but the AfD in Germany and National Rally in France and Trump and so on. And he said, Starmer said, yes, I am worried about them. And the answer to right-wing populism is delivery.
That's right.
Spot on.
100%.
And I agree with that. Yeah. And it's what we've been saying for months.
Yeah.
But you have to actually explain to voters how that delivery is going to happen, because the progressive burden is that by not just saying it's all immigrants' fault, I'm going to build a wall, stop the boats, sloganeering, you genuinely do try and address problems. You then have a that much more complicated and burdensome a duty to say, and this is where this is heading. I know it's hard, Because populists never say, I know it's hard. They say, it's easy.
It's easy.
You just stop the boats.
Give us the keys and
we're just going to send them to Rwanda. It's easy.
Right.
It's easy. Or I'm just going to build a wall.
Yeah.
Or, on day one, and I'm going to drill, baby, drill. And, it's silly things.
Yeah.
But progressives don't do that. But the corollary is they have to set up a roadmap. And I begin to wonder whether he actually gets that.
Do you know what? I keep thinking that I've worked with a lot of chief executives, and I've worked with a lot of chief finance officers, right? And the best of the chief execs were the ones, when you talk about the mission, I remember one in particular, Jeff at Archant, would say, where are we going?
Yes.
What's the destination? And he said,
what's the trajectory?
Once we work out where we're going, we'll be able to work out how to get there. And as long as we know where we've got to get to, if it turns out in a few months that we realise that we should have taken the train and not the bus, we'll be able to correct that, because at least we still know where we're meant to be getting to.
Yeah.
And the alternative is to just do tactical things, and then you find out in 3 months' time, you're still no clear about what it all adds up to.
Yeah.
And then I've met CFOs who sit there and worry about the books all the time. And they make a good balance. Rachel Reeves, obviously, is the CFO, and she's there to worry about the books. But Keir Starmer's got to be the guy who says, Rachel's looking after all the numbers. It's tough, but I'll tell you, once we've gone through the pain, here's where we get to, and it's going to be great.
And what drives me berserk is that it's not as if, unlike the Blair-Clinton era, there wasn't a lot of precedent and knowledge around to learn from. So give you an example, which is there's a great book on the first year of Clinton called The Agenda by Bob Woodward. It's a really good book. And it's just about what it was like when they suddenly arrived, the Clinton administration, 92, in Washington and had to kind of run the country. And they realized very quickly that you could do a very, very narrow range of things well if you wanted to do anything at all. And they sort of ended up sorting out the economy and NAFTA, and then trying and failing to sort out healthcare. But the point of this is that and Blair and then Obama and Brown and there are the places the Western world is fizzing with knowledge and ideas and advice to say this is how you do it. You need to do this if you want to push forward these ideas. You have to establish this kind of framework. I mean, there's a unbelievable pool of talent and wisdom around. I mean, we've been talking sort of slightly lightheartedly, about Tony Blair's, new book and which is brilliant, but actually, you have got if you're Keir Starmer, you can pick up the phone to Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, Alistair Campbell, Jonathan Powell.
I've got his number.
Right. You can just call them up and say, look, why is this? Why have I got myself into such a state in 2 months? Now, actually, I mean, let's keep it small. Let's keep it local rather than small. I bet you that our mate Alistair, in one phone call with Keir, could lay out
a route out of
misery, this, right? This is
without changing anything.
It doesn't. They're not alone. It doesn't have to be like this. They're not. Yeah. They don't have to be sort of pioneers in absolutely everything.
Yeah.
But there's a kind of, you could see this in the interview with Laura Kuenssberg. Starmer has achieved an extraordinary amount in a very short period of time with the Labour Party. And I think that he has made a terrible assumption that achievement means that he knows what he's doing. He's not going to take any lessons from anyone about governing a country. And every single leader in the history of leaders, the one thing they all say is the difference between opposition and power is one of total it's kind, not degree.
Different thing.
And that Blair famously said, by the time he left Downing Street, he was just about ready to be Prime Minister.
Yeah. I thought he was so impressive, by the way, on that Amal Rajan's
podcast.
Well, he shot it in video as well. He interviewed him.
Yeah.
And people think of what they like about
Yeah,
Blair,
but
he was, and I just thought it's a pity that, like you say, there's something about the release of the burden of power that
Yes.
makes these people even more impressive. Quite often,
because they can say what they like,
and they're more reflective, and they
reflective.
see with some clarity. Once all the noise has dissipated a bit, they can see. And I just thought somebody needs to tell Keir Starmer, Keir, look, there is a route here, but
yes,
when you say you're going to be unpopular, when he said that, the immediate person I thought of was Thatcher, right?
Yeah.
She was prepared to be unpopular, right?
but with a purpose.
But with a purpose. Now, listen, for absolute candor, I despise Margaret Thatcher
and the purpose.
everything she stood
Yes.
for. But at least I knew what she stood for.
That's the point.
And you could, and to be fair, you could fight against that.
Yes.
Now, when you ask Keir Starmer, what's the reason you're depriving millions of pensioners of their winter fuel allowance this year?
Yes.
What's the answer is because the Tories have left a big hole in the budget, and that's not good enough.
That's nowhere near
It's got
good
to be
enough.
driven by a social motive.
And a forward-looking a forward-looking agenda that will lead in a reasonably short period of time to a better Britain.
And the crime in this instance, Matt, is that forward-looking agenda in relation to the winter fuel allowance is so obvious that if he'd have just said, it's ridiculous that you're getting millionaires getting this. It's ridiculous that we just hand it out to people who don't need it when there are so many people in this country who need more, right? And we're going to find a way.
Lots more.
We're going to find a way of balancing that disparity.
Yeah.
And we're going to bring those people up just a little bit, but it's going to be massively well received.
Yes.
Now, once you frame it like that, of course, you're going to have people saying, oh, God, they haven't thought about this group or that group, or this is unfair. But at least the general narrative is one of positive purpose instead of fuckwittery, which is what this looks like.
An easy, preliminary narrative would be, look, I get that, but the thing I have to do as my absolute priority is get the public services off their knees.
Right.
Hence, and I know it has annoyed some of you that I am paying public sector employees more, and I came to pay deals, but I had to.
Yeah.
Because those strikes had to end, and they needed more pay, and and we had to pay that.
Yeah.
And we all use those services, including pensioners.
But you
right?
can't be saying, but we're going to get the pensioners to pay for the train drivers' pay rise.
No, exactly.
Which is now the clear narrative.
Which is the clear narrative, and gives the bit of me that really kind of the bit that makes me sleepless is this, which is at the moment reform is just kind of Five Guys, not a hamburger chain.
Yeah. That would be so much better.
Five fascist guys. A place where the hamburgers taste horrible. And it is very fortunate that they have not yet clocked onto what Trump has clocked onto, which is that if you start to be positive about entitlements and social entitlements, whilst being very socially conservative about other things, you're in a very a quadrant with lots of potential.
Yeah.
Now, that's why I hope Farage keeps banging on about the French system of health being better than the NHS.
Yeah.
Because that keeps him out of
the Daily Mail won't let him be that dumb to it. Because come a cold snap in December.
Yes. NHS
the Daily
crisis.
Mail will have 30 reporters around the country
on the NHS crisis,
waiting for. Here's the 89-year-old granddad who died because his fuel allowance got cut, and Farage will be holding
outside,
that up,
and he'll be outside hospitals. You're right.
You bet your life, and because this is it's the easiest right-wing press story that I can remember.
No, it's coming.
It's handed to them on a platter.
You're spot on. You said the main thing, which is, I think this is a dry run for the NHS crisis this winter.
Yeah.
What we're seeing now is what it's going to be like for this government when, and to be fair, not entirely through its own fault. I mean, there's a report coming out on Thursday about the dreadful inheritance it's got from the last government. But by then, that excuse will no longer carry any water at all.
Yeah.
How is it going to deal with that? Is it just going to say, sorry, there's no money because, and you can't have any more until the spending review when it's March next year? How are they going to? I think some politicians fall in love with adversity and fall in love with machismo and hugging the cactus, and I worry that Starmer has.
Well, if I had 2 minutes on the phone with him, you and I both know a little bit about how to present a story.
Yeah,
right?
Very much so.
And if I had 2 minutes with him, I'd say, please think about the message of your action, whatever it's going to be. This idea of endless penury and misery and hardship is not what people voted you in for.
No.
And you are playing, you've only got to look at America, which we're going to talk about in a minute after a break. You've only got to look at America, where their economy is fine and stable.
Yes.
But the narrative is so easily co-opted against
so.
change versus not change. And if Starmer is seen as just another a fake Tory, just continuation of all of the Tory disasters that people voted them out for.
Yeah.
That's what he's risking.
Very much so. And I mean, one sort of final nugget from the Starmer interview was that he mentioned that he was going to see Joe Biden this week on Friday in Washington. Yeah. And that the main purpose, Laura Kuenssberg tried to press him on the differences between the two governments on Israel-Gaza. And I don't think that that's a major cause of anger in Washington, actually. But he said, no, I'm not going there about that. I'm going there about Ukraine. And what is obvious is that he and Biden, and no doubt other members of the alliance, are trying desperately to front load as much aid to Ukraine before January the 20th in case
Orange Maniac comes
in case Trump wins.
Yeah, extraordinary times.
So should we have leading on to that?
Let's have a very quick break, and then we're going to talk about tomorrow night's TV debate in particular, aren't we?
Orange Mania.
So I hadn't realised that it's rushed upon us so quickly. It's tomorrow night, Tuesday night is the debate, isn't it? And we were just chatting before the podcast.
I know.
It's absolutely enormous.
It is amazing to say that it could be bigger in its consequences, if not its sort of kind of gobsmacking content, than the June debate between Biden and Trump.
Definitely. I think it's absolutely...
that debate finished off Biden.
Yeah.
But this one, it's on such a knife edge. I mean, there was a big hoo-ha over the weekend about a New York Times poll which put Trump ahead by a point.
Yeah.
And actually, that's so much within the margin of error that it's silly to think about that.
Yeah.
On its own, out of context. But there were some other things in that poll which were more worrying, I think, for Harris. I mean, for example, some of them just amazed me, which was that voters see Trump, I can barely believe this is, as sort of centrist.
Right.
And a near majority of voters say Mr. Trump is not too far to the left or right on the issues, while only 1/3 say he's too far to the right. Where have they been? Nearly half of voters, in contrast, say Harris is too far to the left.
The one that struck me...
He's a change candidate.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was 62% of people who were likely to vote agreed that the next president has to be a significant change to Joe Biden.
It's a change election.
And that the candidate that most represents that change by an enormous margin...
The 78-year-old maniac.
...is the guy who was the guy before... Not the new face.
The January the 6th guy.
I mean, that guy. And only 22 or 25%
Roe v. Wade guy
thought that Kamala Harris represented the opportunity for change. I mean, that is terrifying.
Well, what it shows you is how difficult it is to understand American politics from the British perspective, and that we've known that all along, but that really does show it. I think the other thing that's worrying is that Trump leads on the economy, the immigration, and sort of on the no more war line.
Yeah.
Harris has got abortion and democracy, and that's not enough.
No.
So what does she have to do tomorrow? Well, she has to sort of do to Trump what Trump did to Biden.
Yeah.
She has to make him, it'll be less dramatic, but she has to make him look like yesterday's man.
Although, to be fair, even to be fair to Donald Trump, not a sentence I'll say very often, but Biden did that to the Biden.
Yes, but
he?
what Trump was very clever in doing
was let him do it.
Was shutting up.
Yeah.
That's worth remembering, because her second task is to get under his skin.
Yes.
Because Trump is incapable of not taking a bait.
Yeah.
And so there are a number of things, take your pick, that she can wind him up about. And she should. But she should also not take the bait because he will accuse her of being a Marxist. He will say the most appalling things about her ethnicity and her sex and her background and how she got on in Californian politics. By the way, she's been elected to a lot more things than he has.
Yeah.
And she's been very good on that generally, which is to say, what did she say in the CNN interview? She said, "Same old playbook. Next question, please." And shrugging off his attacks like that will look good. But the other problem she's got is that she's got to tell the American people a lot more about what she wants to do than she has already. It's not just about beating Trump. It's not being the anti-Trump isn't enough anymore. No,
she's got to say how she's going to be the anti-Biden actually as well.
We're at the bone, you see, because the problem is that she is vice president.
Yeah.
And has been for more than 3.5 years, and she can't disown Biden completely. No. She can say, well, we haven't got everything right, and here's why. He will say his strongest line will be, and he has used it in rallies and interviews and so on, of which he's been doing many, is why haven't you done it already?
Yeah.
That's his strongest line, which is, okay, you want to do this about inflation. You want to do this about the border. You want to do this about America's place in the world. Why haven't you done it already?
Yeah.
And she has to not lose her cool and say, well, Donald, we were picking up all the pieces of the mess you left us behind, and we've come a long way, but we weren't able to do everything in 4 years, and it's going to take me another 4 years or 8 to get the job done.
Yeah.
But so much of it will have to do about who loses their cool. Now, Harris, if you look at her debating, she doesn't lose her cool. So she's got that on her side. She's too cool for school, Kamala Harris. She's very, she's a tough cookie, and I don't think she'll be intimidated or flustered by him.
No. But I think she's got to find a way of belittling him in people's eyes. I also think she's got to be very clear about who she is trying to perform to. And she's not trying to win over Trump voters, but she's trying to convince a lot of people stuck in the middle, either to get out and vote because he represents a massive danger, or that actually Trump's Achilles heel is that, and it's his greatest strength as well, but as quite so often happens, it's also his weakness, is that he is funny, but he's also foolish.
Yes.
And to make him look foolish would be an absolute win.
I mean, what she shouldn't do is waste too much time on him in a funny way. She has to say, all the things that we know she should say about the terrible danger he represents and, the disaster 4 years of Trump. But what she also has to say is, vote for me because of the following. And I think the one thing that she will have very much in her on her side is that one of the disasters of the June debate, the CNN debate between Biden and Trump, was that Biden forgot that it's a split screen.
Right.
So you had him, while Trump was speaking, looking slack-jawed and distracted and all over the place. Yeah. Harris won't do that.
No.
She'll be on point. She's very good at letting her cocking an eyebrow, smiling slightly when someone is saying something stupid. She's a seasoned performer. I mean, 3.5 years in the White House, even if you haven't had a hugely distinguished vice presidency, you can pick up a lot.
Yeah. She's got to play to the fact that she is a woman as well.
Yes.
Because I don't think Trump knows how to handle strong women. I think
that's his Achilles heel.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
he has no way of dealing with it. He had just attacked Hillary. I think he'll be less successful at attacking her. I also think that, oddly enough, and this is maybe clutching at straws, but I don't think it is, I'm glad that there's been a few polls that have suddenly reminded the Democrat
it's not over
world
yeah.
it's not over, because they've had this month of Kamala Mania, the convention, showbiz, celebrity glitz, Coach Waltz, everyone going, hooray, now we've won, and all the rest of it. Yeah. And it's good that a few days before the big debate, the crunch moment in this whole campaign, there have been some figures out saying it's not over. And to be fair, before those polling numbers came out, the Harris campaign issued a memo saying we are the underdogs.
Yeah.
Now that's good.
That's a good mentality.
That is exactly the mentality to go in.
But it may well be true as well.
And it may well be true. And the thing that I still find absolutely amazing is how many Americans still look upon Trump favorably, still think of him as a change maker, still aren't really, it would appear, that bothered by January the 6th, which was a full-blown, insurrectionary attack upon the seat of American democracy.
As they say in the markets, it's all priced in with him, isn't it?
It's all priced in with him. But I mean, that in particular never ceases to amaze me, because...
Well, can you remember when, and again, I think this is about, like I've said repeatedly, you are steeped in US politics and you're an aficionado of it.
Obsessed.
But I remember when George W. Bush got re-elected, the Daily Mirror running a great front page, I thought, which the headline was, how can 53 million people be so dumb?
That's brilliant.
But it was brilliant for a UK audience, but it did betray an absolute kind of fundamental ignorance about the mind of America when it comes to politics.
I mean, America has, there are two hemispheres to the American brain. And although what's interesting is that the division has only become as stark as it has under Trump. I mean, it's always been there. It's always been there. But one of the things that has happened in the last week, which I think has been underreported in this country, but is absolutely amazing, is that we knew that Liz Cheney would come out, the former Republican congresswoman, would come out for Kamala Harris at some point. But Dick Cheney, right?
Exactly.
Dick Cheney, about whom, the Darth Vader of the war on terror. Yeah. The man who single-handedly turned Iraq into, a subsidiary of Halliburton, right? Yeah. Absolutely the villain of the piece.
Yeah.
He loathed throughout the world as a symbol of the kind of hardest edge side of the Bush administration, standing up and saying that there has never been in the entire history of the Republic a greater threat to the Republic and to the democracy of the United States and to the Constitution than Donald Trump. That's Dick Cheney.
It's amazing.
Right? And yet, that American voters, who like Cheney go off at the weekend and shoot people in the face. Yeah. I mean, it's extraordinary that they are still backing this absolutely extraordinary maniac. And I think that it's amazing, 9 years on, we still haven't quite got to the heart of it.
Well, I can't wait are you going to stay up and
Yeah. And it's because it's in Philadelphia, it won't be as late as the...
Bad.
It's
so
not
what time it'll be
it's on Channel 4, and it's, I think the kickoff of coverage is about 1 a.m.
So this will be 1 a.m. Wednesday morning, for early hours of Wednesday
for
morning.
us, 1 a.m. Wednesday morning.
Well,
so enjoy, people.
I mean, and worth staying up for.
Yes, and hopefully we can come back and say a bit on Thursday about how it went,
and hopefully we'll say, didn't she do well? And
I mean,
I'm
not pessimistic. I was pessimistic before the June Biden one, and at the end I was kind of weeping into my coffee kind of thing. But this is Kamala Harris has come on leaps and bounds, right?
But this is an enormous night.
This is
let me go even further, for humanity.
No,
it's no exaggeration, is it?
You're not exaggerating at all.
No.
I mean, the number of things, it's terrifying to think the number of things that hang on whether she can nudge the gear stick just a bit so that America heads towards... It doesn't matter if it's by one electoral voted electoral college, just so that's that with him.
Exactly. Like the meteorite being shot at by a nuclear missile just to go over and hit Mars, will you?
Nudge it away. I mean, this is a Cleopatra's nose situation. It's amazing.
All right, well, we'll see.
Talk about high drama.
Yeah, no, massive drama.
So we've got Keir Starmer having a vote with the fuel allowance. I
think we've sorted it, though, haven't we? We've told Keir what to do. We've told Kamala what to do.
The double bill, we've got then the future of humanity in Philadelphia.
Nothing much to see here, folks. Move along.
Fantastic.
Thanks as ever to our producers at Rethink Audio, led by Matt Hill. If you've got feedback and questions,
please send them.
Fire them in to 2mats@tnepublishing.com. That's the number 2, MATTS, at tnepublishing.com. If you've heard Tony Blair talking about his new book on leadership, if you've read the reviews, which are all getting 5 stars, you'll be delighted to know that we've still got a small number of signed hardback copies of his new book on leadership. It's an extraordinary book. I've finally completed it. It really is. It's not what you expect it to be at all. It's a really fascinating book, amazingly well written, signed by Tony Blair, and you can get it when you subscribe to The New European from just £1 a week. Go to theneweuropean.co.uk/2mats. That's the number 2, MATTS. There's a link in the show notes. We'll see you on Friday.
See you on Friday.
Have a great week.
Have a great week.